Okay, I'm with Dr. Carol Turley from the Plymouth Marine Laboratory. Could you tell me a little bit about the work that you do in relation to the environmental consequences of ocean acidification? What is that exactly?
Well, ocean acidification is what happens when the CO2 that we're emitting into the atmosphere gets taken up by the oceans. Already around 25% of the CO2 we've emitted since the Industrial Revolution has been taken up by the oceans. When you add CO2 to seawater, it forms carbonic acid, and so the oceans are becoming more and more acidic the more CO2 we put in there. It also changes other parts of the ocean's carbonic chemistry, such that it might affect shell-producing organisms. So that's why we're worried, that's why we're concerned, and that's why we're here. We were here to launch a United Nations Environment Programme special bulletin on ocean acidification and food security.
What are the obvious effects, the visible effects of ocean acidification?
Well, future effects, when we do experiments on organisms in a high CO2 ocean, with CO2 concentrations that we might get this century or even halfway through this century, it can be thinning of the shells, it can be reduction in reproductive capability. It can even be behavioural problems, such as some of the reef fish sense of smell is affected, so that they can't detect predators quite so well and may find it difficult finding their way home. So shellfish and crabs and some of the things we eat, as well as the other things that do really important roles, like some of the phytoplankton in the ocean, may be impacted by future ocean acidification.
So to what stage or to what levels has damage already been done, and is it possible to reverse some of the damage that's already been done?
Already there's been a 30% change in acidity, so an increase in acidity by 30%. By mid this century it'll be 150%, and it's totally predictable depending on how much we put up into the atmosphere. So the certainty with what happens to the chemistry is very, very clear. What happens in terms of impacts on organisms, it's much harder to work out. For example, coral reefs, tropical coral reefs, by about mid-century they will find it difficult keeping up with the natural rates of bioerosion that happen to reefs. Their ability to form the skeletons that comprise the reefs will be reduced, such that the erosion will basically result in the reefs getting less and less healthy and able.
Is your message one that's sinking in? Are people listening? Because I think obviously the problem is often that people the emissions are a long way from where people can see them. They're out deep in the sea, in the deep ocean or whatever. It's very hard to perhaps bring it home to people, the effects that it is having.
It is quite hard to bring home how important the oceans are to mankind. For example, every second breath that we breathe is produced by the oceans, and they fix half of global productivity. So they're hugely important in terms of our life support system. And of course they provide food protein, fish protein, for around 3 billion people on the planet. Have around 50% of their protein as fish protein, and about 1 billion people depend totally on fish protein for their major protein source. And with an increase in population and an increase in aquaculture is mostly shell fisheries that are particularly vulnerable to ocean acidification. That's why we're concerned, and we want to bring the threat of ocean acidification, of this CO2 when it gets in the seawater, to Copenhagen. Initially last year, that's what we did. And we've noticed that a lot of the politicians are actually talking about ocean acidification now, so that's an achievement. And we would like to see within COP16 a better mention of the oceans, because so many people live close to the ocean and depend on the ocean for their survival.
And once you have the recognition, what kind of concrete measures would you like to see in place, either here or beyond Durban and beyond, to solve the problem?
To solve the problem is mitigation, really. It is reducing the amount of CO2 that we're putting into the atmosphere. And the great news is, if you mitigate for ocean acidification, you also mitigate for climate change. So this ocean acidification is the other CO2 problem that we've brought here to COP16 in Cancun, and we would very much like it recognised, because we think it is a major threat to biodiversity, to mankind, and the health of our oceans, and ultimately the health of our planet.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.